welcome to June 2026. We are back at it with GigaTen. We're in the throes of summer and the World Cup starting. And in New York, where we are, we had the Knicks winning a game. We're in the basketball finals, so we're very excited. And New York City is going nuts. Let's just say so.
Good news.
I don't live in the city, but my son is having a blast. My older son. But anyway,
happy for him.
Yeah, he's great. All of them are having a great time. So speaking of excitement, that's a big title. Number one, the report CDR has been waiting for. Everything we need to know. Tell us about it.
The state of CDR is kind of the biggest report that our sector produces. It was produced twice, 23, 24, and then we had a 2-year gap, and now again in 26. And it basically brings together the top academics of the space, and not just academics, also some other contributors, but it's 74 authors, and they put together 300 pages of incredible content. And it's both kind of going through, assessing each technology and its potential, how policies are around the whole world, how research is going, innovation, patenting, but also crucially the gap that exists between government commitments to CDR and what is really needed. It has a million different things that you could dive into. It's a real treasure trove. So I was very excited to read it, to talk about it with one of the authors on stage last week in Brussels. And it's definitely a read that I recommend to everyone. There's something for everyone.
Nice. All right. I guess that's a milestone when you start having nice big compendium reports about an industry. We also have arrived at the EU's Buyer Club. So number two, the EU Buyers Club is official. Let's see, the excitement is large. Yes. So what happened?
This has been long expected, anticipated. We spoke about this in the past. The EU has long been planning how to catalyze private sector demand for removals and how to essentially use its own purchasing power and soft power to enable more private purchases. And they've been designing this club over the last year and a half, and it's now launched in Brussels. And it's basically an open confederation of existing buyers, open to any new buyers who get together, work with the European Commission, and try to find projects that ideally have already made it through some sort of due diligence by the European Commission, some sort of funding by the European Commission, and that then get additional funding from the voluntary carbon market from these buyers. They kind of launched it. They explained a little bit how it works. It's still in the early days. Any buyer can join. Any buyer should join. And for suppliers, maybe interesting, how do I get in? How do I get my project in? It's currently through your buyers. So go to any of your existing buyers and tell them to join the club and bring your project in. But the impact is TBD. I understand that there's a lot of exciting stuff happening behind the scenes that wasn't announced yet. So hopefully we will see a couple of purchases announced from this club this year.
And what's the benefit of this? I mean, rather than just doing it yourself, just more purchasing power, or how's it help?
I guess the hope is always to make it easier for corporates, right? To de-risk, strengthen numbers, maybe delegating due diligence to a certain extent. And, the Stripe is taking a big role, Stripe Frontier. So the idea, I guess, is, if Stripe's done the due diligence or if Microsoft's done the due diligence, that should be good. Creating a platform to actually talk is also, I think, has value in itself. The link to the European Commission is still a bit weak, I find, because so far they're not taking a lot of ownership in the sense of, we're going to create a funnel, we're going to create a platform for this. It seems to be very much driven by the buyers. So I'm hoping that the Commission will maybe bring in some of their money, right? And be like, okay, you've chosen these projects, here's some funding we have, let's put it together.
Right.
But it's just a start. So I hope that it evolves over time.
So that's interesting. As number three, CBAM just got interesting. Compliance markets. What's happening in the compliance markets?
CBAM is the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is essentially the way to make sure that companies priced taxed on carbon in Europe don't just move abroad and ship their stuff to Europe. And it has been a hugely impactful tool to get other countries around the world to put in place their own carbon pricing systems. What they've done now is they have suggested that they would be accepting countries to use up to 10% international carbon credits within their carbon pricing. It's getting a bit complex, but basically, imagine you're a steel company. I'll make an example. Imagine you're a steel company in Turkey, and you are subject to this tariff, which will make your steel very expensive because it's carbon intensive. What Europe has been saying already is if you're paying a carbon price locally in Turkey that is the same that a European company would pay under the ETS, we're fine. Like, you don't have to pay twice. What they're saying now is you could also potentially use some international carbon credits to lower that fee that you have to pay to Europe. This creates kind of a market, potentially, the first market that I'm aware of for UN Article 6.4 credits. There's a lot, it's a pretty complex issue. So we recorded an episode with kind of a CBAM guru, Dan Maleski, on this. I definitely recommend for people wanting to dig deeper to do so, because it's hard to summarize that in 30 seconds. But it is a very interesting avenue, potentially, for international credits to make its way into this compliance case.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I don't have much to add to that. The stuff gets really in the weeds, which is good. The devil's in the details. Number 4, 2026 Q1 sets the bar. How'd we do? Oh, biochar, of course.
It was a big quarter. There were 2.3 megatons purchased, which is over 5 times more than the same quarter last year. I think what stood out to me more than anything was that the majority of that 1.3 megatons was not from Microsoft, which is interesting news. Microsoft still bought a megaton, don't get me wrong. They still did a big chunk of that, but there were over 100 buyers that bought the majority of it, which kind of shows that there are other buyers purchasing. And then, in terms of the deliveries, very much it's a biochar quarter. 77% of the deliveries were biochar, and 93% of the purchases. So biochar going very strong, but also I think the main message is it's not just Microsoft.
We need to diversify, right? So that's good. I mean, going forward, yeah. Well, anyway, I can ask this later. Number 5, our RIP $100 a ton. Yeah, the writing was on the wall for that.
Here, CDI4AI and Opus they've done this already last year, I believe. They did a survey on pricing expectations. And what they do is they ask buyers by technology in 2025, 2030, 2050, how much are you planning to spend on each technology? And then they ask the suppliers, how much are you planning to get? And what comes out of that, obviously, is a gap between buyers and suppliers, where the suppliers are expecting more than the buyers are willing to pay. And that pricing gap is what they're analyzing. It's very interesting. It's pretty big. In 2025, it's $107 per ton. In 2030, it's going down to $48. This is aggregate. It's really interesting when you look at specific technologies. So, for example, for biochar, the gap is very small. For DAX, the gap is huge. And so it kind of shows that, the corporates are kind of not really aligned with CDR startups in terms of where the road is going. And
why
on
did
the
they
$100,
sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Why did they settle on $100? Sorry.
This is the second part of the story.
Yeah.
There's a second takeaway from this report, which is what I used for the headline, which is the famous $100 per ton, which is something we've spoken about in the past. It's this kind of mythical number that startups all put in their pitch deck. But it's pretty clear that both startups and buyers do not expect durable CDR to go below $100 a ton. So that's what I meant with kind of rest in peace $100 a ton, is that there seems to be an acknowledgement that this is not going to happen.
Yeah, where did they come up with the number initially? Was it just because it was a nice round number? Do you even know? Like, I was always wondering about that, because I don't know if it was ever that. It was a target always, I was curious.
It came from, I think, a Department of Energy in the US challenge where they basically said, how could we get CDR to less than $100 a ton? This is like 2020 or 2021. And then that number was kind of picked up by startups, expected by investors, and then became kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy that kept going.
Right.
But yeah, it originally came from the DOE, I think.
Got it. Well, I guess it's healthy then that we're moving away from that because it never really was based in reality, probably.
No.
6, are cities the future of CDR demand? Yeah, I mean, definitely a market for it for sure, one would think.
I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? And cities are often more progressive on climate, more proactive. There's a direct link to citizens who just want a greener city, who want a more sustainable city. And we have seen cities in the past act, but we've never seen a city act as much as Stockholm just did. They bought 750,000 tons of CDR from Stockholm Exergy, which is based in Stockholm, as well as the name already says. And that is huge. It makes them the 5th biggest purchaser of CDR in the world overnight. And it's just a great example because there are a lot of CDR companies based in or just around cities. And having their own city as an off-taker creates a much more circular story. And so I'll also, if you work in a city, I would point you to the City CDI initiative, which is trying to kind of create a knowledge base and a network for people working in cities who want to make a difference in carbon removals.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
it makes a
great
lot of
news from
sense.
Stockholm.
It makes a lot of sense,
Yeah,
especially because they don't necessarily have nature to cycle the car. You know what I mean? It's such a hyper concentration of human activity. It makes a lot of sense that you would engineer your carbon removals because ever since I moved out to the country, you see the natural cycles function a lot more, you know? So I don't know. It
then in
makes
the
a lot of
city, yeah.
sense, actually. Yeah, absolutely. Number 7, yay! Octavia is first for Africa, but not last. I love hearing good news about them and Kenya.
Yeah, congrats to Octavia, Kenyan company, obviously also featured in your film,
Mm-hmm.
who have become the first African direct air capture company to store permanently carbon underground with their partner Sella in the Great Rift
Mm-hmm.
Valley. So yeah, this is, I think, a very important symbolical step because it shows that it can be done. And now it's time to scale. But they were only one, I think it was the 4th or 5th company in the world that's actually done this. So
Done
first
it,
in
yeah.
Africa, but one of the first in the world.
Yeah. And as we know, Kenya, for those who are new to this, is ideal for DAC. So DAX. DAX is the new thing now. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. 8, the initiative ERW has been waiting for. Oh, good. Because I love ERW too. I think it's a really interesting, but it had a bit of a correction in terms of expectations in the last year. So where are we with them?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, I think people thought that ERW would just kind of be flying like
Right.
biochar, but then there's still a lot of questions. There's a lot of uncertainties on measurement, and that's holding back policy support. That's holding back buyers. And so as a result, there is this organization, NGO called Cascade. They've been doing amazing work on ERW, and they've created the Bedrock Initiative with the idea to create really a platform for shared knowledge creation and knowledge sharing around ERW to accelerate the answers to these questions. And so very grateful to them for this because if we just rely on the current processes, it will take too long. And
Mm-hmm,
there's
mm-hmm.
so much work being done by these startups and by a lot of researchers. There's a lot of work being done on ERW measurement, for example,
Yeah, like what
but it's
Dirk's
probably not
doing
shared.
with Carbon Drawdown Initiative. I mean, all of those buckets and robots measuring all the different. I love it. Um,
That's where I'm going on Tuesday. He's hosting a little
are you?
summit, which is
Oh, I
nice,
love it.
and
Yeah.
the first time. So I'm gonna finally see all the buckets.
Oh, really? You haven't seen them yet? It's really impressive. And also, he just dropped a 15-minute documentary about his work, which he just
Excellent.
announced. So, yeah. Number 9, the art of Article 6, Veronica.
Yeah, Veronica Elgert from the BAFU, the essentially Ministry of the Environment in Switzerland. Wanted to feature her this month because I've been working with her a lot lately. And she is really one of the pioneers in government of making the international system work. So, how do we
Mm-hmm.
essentially use the UN system, Article 6.2, especially, but also Article 6.4? How do we make it work for governments? And she's, I guess, the brains behind a lot of the first of a kind deals and partnerships that have been struck between Switzerland and Norway, Switzerland and Sweden. Switzerland has 15 Article 6.2 deals, way more than anyone else in the world. And she's, yeah, the person behind it. So a great person to follow, to talk to, especially if you work in government and you want to understand the whole space better. She's trying to figure it out. So very grateful for that.
Very grateful for people that are willing to work at that level because it takes a lot of patience. Uh, Number 10, introducing humans of CDR.
Yeah, it's a new fun series that we've launched with CDR Jobs, where we look at how people get into CDR and we tell those stories. It takes a million, we take a million different paths. And I mean, there's now people who study CDR, I love that. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is, most of us have taken random, arbitrary paths, and we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
feature those to kind of also show to others that it's possible and to welcome more people into the sector. So we have the first
Yeah.
two online, and yeah, go check them out.
Yeah, I love that. I saw that. It's good. On the final note for this month, the big news generally has been data centers. That's really come forward here in this country in terms of energy use, water usage, and all of that stuff. And was wondering if you thought about how CDR fits in the data center story, if at all, because there's going to be a need for. I mean, the amount of energy that some of these, it's almost as if we forgot about climate and are going whole hog into AI, you know, and you know what I mean, and all that. You know what I'm saying? Like in some of these cases, it's
Of course,
one of them. I think is 20%. I think is was it of Ireland? I forgot. I think it was a European country. It was like 20% of their energy usage or something. So
it's
I
mad,
just thought it's a
and
use
it's
case. It's a use case for CD. I mean, meaning it's like we're going to need it more than before, you know.
but
So.
sadly, I mean, on if you do the maths, yes, but in practice, I think the opposite is true.
Mm-hmm.
If we see companies, we see big tech companies installing gigawatts of gas turbines, and you would say, ah, okay, now they need more CDR. But what I see happening more is they see that their commitment would have to increase significantly financially for removals,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe
Mm-hmm.
as a result, they ditch the whole thing altogether because they wouldn't be
Oh,
able to keep it up
because
financially.
it's too expensive. Hmm.
So
Interesting.
I don't like I've seen that, and there's very small exceptions. There's also a data center company, a big European data center company that is, for example, the that purchased a carbon removal company. Like that does exist, but it's really the exception. And in general, I'm very worried by what the big tech companies, what it means for their climate commitments, because they simply won't be able to keep up their climate commitments
No,
if they're building these amounts
it's
of gas turbines.
absolute. It's a contradiction. It's an absolute contradiction, and so I was just curious about what that mean. You know what does that mean? It's a complete contradiction in
And they
direction.
just want to move fast at the lowest possible cost.
Yeah.
They clearly don't care how most of them how clean that energy is, what that means for the environment. It's not part of the equation
No,
at
I
all.
listened to I listened to a long interview about what they're calling compute. This idea that whoever has the most compute wins in this future world that we're supposed to be living in. And it's some of the same people that for so long were talking about the environment, and now it's all about compute. You know, so that makes me think about so many things. You know, commitment and reality and data and truth. You know, like what's happening. I find it to be we're at a real big turning point with this. I think it's not a small story, and yeah, I'm just curious because I thought, well, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of perhaps symbiosis with DAC, particularly with some of this stuff, but maybe not.
There's one link. There's one link that is not obvious, and that might be me being just daydreaming a bit. But obviously, the short-term solution is gas turbines, but the medium to long-term solution is renewables because it's much cheaper. And so a lot of these people are building out renewables as well. It's just not the primary solution to get like one of these data centers off the ground. And we're going to build out a ton of renewables over the next 5 or 10 years in the US as a result. If these data centers do not turn out to be as needed, yeah, because it could also be that this is a huge freaking bubble. It bursts at some point and we're left with terawatts of renewables, and suddenly we need a use for that. So again, that's me daydreaming, but that's for me the link potentially to DAX and CDR. But
that's interesting. There's a friend of mine who I met recently is turning on 3 Mile Island, a nuclear installation for the Microsoft data center. And there's been a lot of. I did a piece with Xeon Lights about nuclear energy, and maybe it got a bad rap. So it's not maybe as terrible as we all think. So that's interesting. And that will.
I just did a show on that as well. I just did a show on nuclear with that example as well. And I hear what you're saying. Let's see.
Yeah, Tree Plus, Xeon and I had a conversation, I think 6 months ago already on this. And my friend, I know Oliver Stone, who is the director, and he did a doc called Nuclear Now. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So anyhow, with that, it's interesting, really interesting. So anyway, with that in mind, I hope you have a good summer until we see each other in July.